Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Barnet Environment Hustings, which is taking place in the lead up to the local elections on the 5th of May. My name is Wendy, and I am a member of one of the 4 non-political environment-focused community organisations from Barnet that has organised this evening's event. Each of the 4 organisations will run a segment in the next 90 minutes, and so I will leave them to introduce themselves at the start of their segment. I will, however, introduce our speakers, and we are delighted to have speakers from the 4 main parties this evening. We were also sorry not to be able to include the other candidates putting themselves forward for election, and we thank anyone who is willing to work towards making our community an even better place to live, work and study. We've invited our speakers so they will have a chance to tell you, their voters, how they intend to act over the next 4 years in response to the climate and biodiversity crisis the world is facing. We hope this provides an opportunity for them to present their case to you based on their party's manifesto commitments, rather than what the other parties are not doing, so that you can decide how to place your vote at the ballot box in 2 weeks' time. Our 4 speakers will have the chance to introduce themselves in a moment, but they are, in surname alphabetical order, David Farbey from the Green Party, Sachin Patel from the Liberal Democrat Party, Councillor Alan Schneiderman from the Labour Party, and Councillor Daniel Thomas from the Conservative Party. Before we move to our first topic, a little bit of housekeeping. Each speaker will be asked to answer questions in each section in a different order, and they will be given the same amount of time for their answers. We will be strict with timings if needed, so that everyone has a chance to speak equally, and so that we are finished at 9 p.m. as planned. Captions will be running at the bottom of the screen to aid viewing, and they are automatically generated. This means there may be some mistyped words that are out of our control, and we apologise in advance if this is the case. Thank you to everyone who submitted a question in advance. There were lots to choose from, and we have grouped as many as possible into 8 pre-formatted questions, which have been sent to the candidates in advance. We also encourage you to use the chat function during the event, both to comment on what you've heard and to reply to each other. We've got about 80 people in the room this evening, so it could get lively, but we ask that you please remain positive and polite in what you type, as well as respecting people's differing opinions. The chat will be monitored during each section, and some key points will be read out, but we may not have a chance to read them all. Time allowing, we will invite the candidates to respond, or the chair of each section will provide some thoughts to wrap up each topic. However, all chat, as well as all of the pre-submitted questions, will be sent to all of the 4 candidates after the event, so all of your views will be heard. Without further ado, we're going to invite the candidates in surname alphabetical order to make an introductory statement of up to 1 minute each, and why they are here this evening to represent their party on these important issues. David, you're first, please.
Well, thank you very much for that very kind introduction, and thank you for inviting Barnet Green Party to take part in these hustings. As you know, we are facing a climate and ecological crisis. We had COP26 just a few months ago. Since then, very little has happened in practice. While a lot of action needs to be taken by national governments, local authorities have their part to play. And that's why Barnet Green Party is standing candidates in every ward in the borough in order to give everybody the chance of voting for the Green Party. Now, this council elections happen once every 4 years, and I know that people attending this meeting are those who have committed themselves to action on the environment in various areas all through the year, every year. But this is your one chance to make a political statement once every 4 years. So I hope that you will consider voting for the Green Party candidate in your ward. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Sachin, you're next.
Good evening. My name is Sachin Patel, and I'm a Liberal Democrat candidate in East Finchley. And on 5th of May 2022, local people can vote for a fresh start. The Tory-run council is letting Barnet down and really largely ignoring the climate emergency. And in fact, the urgency demanded by that climate crisis has failed to capture the attention of both the Conservatives and Labour. Barnet Liberal Democrats, which I'm proud to represent this evening, have an ambitious plan for our borough centred on the environment. Across the borough, we will help to build a green, clean, safe and healthy community, recognising the role that each of these 4 areas play in tackling our pressing environmental issues. And I really look forward to talking on all 4 of these areas and how intrinsically linked they are to solving the climate emergency at a local level this evening. Thank you.
Perfect. You're all timing things very well. I'm very grateful. And Alan, you're next, please.
Oh, good evening. I'm Alan Schneiderman and I'm one of the Barnet Labour councillors and our environment lead, which is why I'm here tonight. It's great to see so many people have joined, which I think is recognition of the importance of the environment and the need to tackle the climate emergency that we're facing. I'll keep my fingers crossed there's no technical gremlins beyond someone not realising they're on mute, and I've just checked I'm not. But thank you to all the organisations that are involved in making tonight happen. There are lots and lots of hustings going on, it seems, but it is great to have one that's focused on the environment. Barnet Conservatives have a poor record on everything from a lack of urgency in tackling climate change to scrapping food waste collections and neglecting many green spaces across the borough. So I look forward to setting out tonight why it's time for a change and how a Labour council in Barnet would make a real difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. And finally, Dan.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Dan Thomas. I'm leader of the Barnet Conservative Group. Under Conservative leadership, the Council has started work on a new sustainability strategy, the timing of which means that we can factor in the recent Environment Act. We pledge to involve all individuals and groups in the consultation. The strategy will build on the many achievements we've made so far, such as a 59% reduction of carbon emissions on the Council's non-education estate between 2014-15 and 2018-19. We've completed a refit project and commenced a decarbonisation scheme which will reduce CO2 emissions by 230 tonnes a year. We've switched the entire streetlight network to LED lighting, which reduced light-based emissions by 66%. To improve air quality, we've installed one of the largest, if not the largest, electric vehicle charging point system in the country. Thank you. And we pledge to make the council net zero by 2030.
Thank you all very much. And I apologise, I've realised that the captions aren't on, so I will correct that as soon as I can. And thank you for your introductions. We're now going to move on to the first topic for the evening, which is healthy homes, and will be led by Saeed Ahmed.
Thanks, Wendy, and thanks to all the candidates for coming along this evening, and to all of you participants who have come along. Hi, as Wendy mentioned, my name's Saeed Ahmed. I sit on the steering group for Barnet Climate Action Group. For those who don't know us, we're a collection of concerned residents across the faith, environment and cultural communities in the borough, really keen on developing the borough's response to climate change and the climate emergency. We've been meeting every month for around about 2.5 years or so. Details of the group, the work and our previous meetings and events is on our website, barnetclimate.org.uk. That's enough of me. We've got 2 questions here, which the candidates have seen. They've really been synthesized down from the responses through the Eventbrite. So thank you to all of those who submitted their questions. They're on 2 aspects, really, one on energy efficiency and the second one on food waste collection. I should say I'm ably being helped here by my colleague Tony Sarche, who will give me, provide us with a bit of a rundown of what's been going on in the chat column at the end of this session. I'm going to try my best to kind of time you, but you look like you've all been dab hands at doing this so far, so I can't envisage any problems. Dan, you'll be going first, and then it's Alan, Sachin, and then David. I think you've been advised of that already. And the opening question is, and I think like Bamber Gascoigne here, government data shows that Barnet has over 19,000 households suffering from fuel poverty. As we well know, the energy price rises that we're all facing will increase that number, in fact, likely to double that number, such that over 1/4 of the households in the borough will be struggling to pay their energy bills sometime later this year. So the question that's been asked through the Eventbrite is, what should the council be doing over the coming months to help residents make their homes more energy efficient and help reduce their energy costs? Dan, over to you first, please.
Thank you. Well, I think it's over the coming months and over the next, years and decades that we need to help our residents, particularly those on lower incomes, to insulate their houses, make them more energy efficient. We will continue to promote the Green Homes Grant, which offers low-income households up to £10,000 to pay for new insulation, low-carbon heating systems, smart heating controls. And if re-elected, I will call on the government for more Green Home Grant funding. And I'll also implement an awareness campaign giving residents practical advice on energy saving measures. It's a shame that we had a press release on this in February. I didn't see the local press pick this up really. We would really like them to help us promote the Green Homes Grant to help those low income households insulate their houses. We also pledged to retrofit all council housing stock to have an EPC rating of at least B, and for all new housing to be the same. And of course, there's been £150 rebate this month on council.
Oh, has Dan suddenly gone silent, or is it me? Dan, thank you for that. You went silent unless there's a problem with me. Can everybody still hear me okay?
We can hear you, but Dan cut out. Okay. Yeah.
But Dan, you cut out the last 20 seconds, but hopefully you'll come back. Maybe turn your mute on and off, because you have gone mute at the moment, Dan. Say something, Dan. You still mute there, mate. We'll come back to you. Let's move on. Alan, you are next. Alan Schneiderman, please, over to you.
Thanks, Syed. We're in the middle of the worst cost of living crisis for decades. And yes, a big part of that is the huge rise in energy bills, which are already hitting people hard. And as we know, that's only going to get worse later this year. The government response, including a loan that needs to be paid back, is totally inadequate. And the Barnet Conservatives hiking council tax has made things worse. Council tax is a regressive tax that hits the poorest hardest, and yet the Conservatives have increased it again this year, despite pretending to freeze it. If we win, we want to pay back this year's 1% rise to residents and pledge to keep it low going forward. On energy efficiency, we'll appoint a council officer for healthy homes to help with developing a plan to improve energy efficiency in both social and private sector homes. That includes increasing the number of well-insulated homes, working towards the Friends of the Earth target for all homes to be properly insulated by 2030. In addition to retrofitting social housing, we'll help residents to secure grants to retrofit private homes. In the last round of the government's social housing decarbonation fund, Camden got over £1 million, Enfield received 800,000 and Barnet received nothing. And we've got to change that. All of this and more is part of ensuring we have a comprehensive approach to tackling fuel poverty. And to start, that's why I'm happy to formally announce tonight that Barnet Labour is signing the End the Fuel Poverty Coalition local election pledge. And I'll post the link in the chat for anyone who wants to find out more and find out exactly what we signed up to. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. That's great. By all means, all candidates, when you're not speaking, if you feel you want to post things in the chat, please feel free to do so. Next up on the same question is Sachin Patel for the Lib Dems. Sachin, over to you.
Yeah, the Liberal Democrats have really led the charge nationally in terms of pointing out some of the measures the government could be taking to address fuel poverty. And, we've full-throatedly supported calls for windfall taxes on some of the energy companies and uplifts to universal credit and other benefits that would give a real short-term, fillip, I think, to people in this kind of situation. We also recognise that Barnet is, particularly bad, I think, in terms of the state of our housing stock, in terms of its energy efficiency. And what we really want to focus on is not just social housing stock and homeowners, but also giving a fair deal for renters. We feel that they're sort of particularly kind of marginalized in this situation, where of course the costs fall on landlords, and the benefits will be afforded to renters. So we want to really address that and really focus very hard on giving landlords the information they need and to help them understand the efficiency of their property and what needs to be done to stamp out cold and damp and indeed improving energy efficiency, because we also recognize the intrinsic links between energy efficiency in the home, the health of the residents within that, and the cost of living. The other thing I would just briefly say is that we need to look at what will have the most short-term impact, and I think for that it's likely to be insulation. So I think we really want to focus our energies there. Thanks.
Cheers, Sachin. That's great. I'm glad to see my kind of gentle winding up measure is working its way through the communications. David, without any further delay, over to you.
Thank you very much. It's very gratifying for me to hear that the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrat Party are adopting long-standing Green Party policies. And all I can say is that although the Green Party doesn't have any current representation on Barnet Council, there are councils where the Green Party is part of the governing coalition. For example, in Lewes in Sussex, the Green Party-led council has introduced a retrofitting programme across all its social housing. And in order to get the best commercial deal for the council, they worked in cooperation with other local authorities in the area so that they could have a bulk buying project. Having done that, they were then able to invite private homeowners to take advantage of the same cost savings in order to retrofit their homes. And this was a program that was grassroots led. It was led in cooperation with residents and in cooperation with the social housing tenants, so that it wasn't imposed on people, but it was the Green Party listening to the needs of local residents and implementing a retrofitting program that insulated houses and therefore reduced fuel demand. And I hope that if we're elected in sufficient numbers to Barnet Council, we'll be able to implement a similar program here, because everyone deserves a warm, safe house and home to live in, whether they are a homeowner or a renter or a social renter or a private renter. And we'd like to see everybody benefit from that. Thank you.
Thank you, David. That was very good. Thank you all for keeping to time. That was excellent. Dan, we had a little problem with you in the last 10 seconds. Can you say something, Dan, and hopefully we can hear you?
I've just taken my mute off now.
Perfect. You're absolutely clear as a bell. That's great. Gents, thanks very much for that first round. That was our first tester and it worked very well. You're all clearly dab hands at this. We'll move on swiftly to question 2. Again, this is the synthesis of questions that came through Eventbrite, and this focuses on food waste collection. So the question to ask here is, Barnet is the only borough in the North London Waste Authority not to recycle food waste, and it stopped this service for residents back in September 2018. The Environment Act 2021 will require councils to ensure food waste collections must take place at least once a week by 2023. The question is, when food waste collection is reintroduced back in Barnet, how should the council ensure participation of food recycling is maximised, and also that food waste is processed by anaerobic digestion plant? Dan, over to you.
Thank you. So I'm going to be absolutely honest with you. Encouraging more households to separate their food waste will be very difficult. And anybody on this panel who pretends otherwise is, in my opinion, naive. We as a borough really try to encourage residents with this, with public awareness campaigns. We even had door knocking of those areas where there was a very low take up of the food waste service. And we never went past sort of the high teens, 20% of households putting out food waste, unfortunately, separately. And that was not through lack of trying or us wanting to encourage our residents. So it is going to be difficult, this, and I'm going to be, and I think politicians need to be honest with the public and lobby groups and community groups, so that as and when the government supports councils to introduce food waste, we will of course bring that back up. We will encourage people, but I just want to manage expectations that it will be difficult. On the process of disposing of food waste, whether it's anaerobic digestion or another method, we'd also have to factor in cost, because that is also a big factor for us in this borough. we do get less funding per head than other boroughs. So we do have to be very, very careful with our costs. But I'm willing to throw everything at it to get awareness, not just for food waste, but also recycling rates increased as well.
Cheers, Dan. Thank you for that. Alan, over to you. Same question.
Thank you, Syed. This is another example with food waste of Barnet Conservatives failing to take the environment seriously. Rather than build on the roughly 1/3 of residents who were already recycling their food waste, they scrapped the separate collections, and this was supported by a majority of the current Barnet Lib Dem councillors. And despite the Environment Act, the Tory administration has repeatedly, and we heard just now, refused to make a commitment to reinstating it. When it comes to anaerobic digestion, the Tories also don't get it. I've had many arguments in the council's Environment Committee when the Tory vice chair has repeatedly told me that the scientific evidence is mixed. But scrapping it wasn't just an environmentally poor decision, it made no financial sense either, as the cost per tonne of disposing of food with general waste is significantly more than the cost of processing by anaerobic digestion. Scrapping the separate food waste collection means that rather than building on the thousands of residents who are already doing it, we now have to start from scratch. So unlike the Tories, we have made a commitment to reinstate those separate collections, and we will work relentlessly with residents, community groups and others to maximise participation. And that also includes non-food waste, where Barnet's recycling rates are also shockingly low, lower than for many other councils. We do, of course, want to reduce food waste in the first place and also encouraging composting. And finally, for the avoidance of any doubt, just in case it comes up later, Barnet Labour is guaranteeing that we will maintain weekly bin collections.
Cheers, Alan. Thank you for that. Sachin, straight over you, please.
It won't come as a surprise that on the doorstep, bin collections come up time and time again. And I think this is just one example of how Barnet has gone totally the wrong way, comprehensively on bin collection. The Lib Dems commit to bringing back brown bins, and we also commit to, over the lifetime of the council, move to curbside separation of recyclables. Because when we talk to neighbours, what they tell us is they find it bizarre that we don't have effective methods of sorting out food waste, and they find it baffling that so much of the recyclable waste is, of such low quality and so mixed that it is going for, incineration rather than proper processing. So what would the Liberal Democrats do on this? Firstly, I think we need to look at where there's the greatest kind of barriers to really encouraging and getting that kind of change. Councillor Thomas has mentioned that it is hard. Behaviour change is very hard, and it's very hard when you start from a low baseline, thanks to the poor show from Barnet's Tories over the years. We want to look particularly at what happens for people living in flats, where there's just numerous barriers to committing to sort of proper waste, food waste. Processing. So that's going to be an area of focus for us. I think the other thing we would say is that, people actually feel that the sort of weekly bin collection side of things, other boroughs do this differently. And we do want to look at this thing in the round, not just one particular thing in terms of, the brown bins, but comprehensively, what is our approach to waste collection? Thanks.
Sachin, thank you for that. That face you've seen pop up is my colleague Tony Sarche, who after David's contribution will just give us a kind of reflection of what's been going on in the chat column. But before he does that, David, final word in this session, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Obviously, we would like to see collection of separated food waste and separated household recycling. I think that our previous panelists have expressed their dissatisfaction with the Barnet policies, and of course we share that. Now, the problem that we need to think about is, how do we reduce the production of waste? How do we encourage manufacturers and retailers to use recyclable packaging, or to not to use packaging at all? How do we get rid of waste from the commercial cycle? And that's something that local authorities can look into just as much as national governments. When it comes to anaerobic digestion, well, at the moment, North London Waste Authority's policy is to process food waste through anaerobic digestion at Hertfordshire facilities. We have to make sure that happens. But So in order to encourage people, you need education through leaflets to homes, through programs in schools, and also you need to make sure that your crews are trained and supervised, so we don't have cases in which crews accidentally or perhaps without much thought mix up waste so that things can be recycled properly. And I think there's a whole lot that can be done in the area of waste management, and the frequency of bin collections is an issue that some people want to make, but I don't think that that's the key point. The key point is that there should be less waste, we should recycle more, and the council should facilitate that.
David, thank you for that. That was very clear as well. Thank you to all 4 candidates. You gave a great account of yourself here, keeping to time and running through the policies in a very comprehensive manner. Meanwhile, lots of things was going on chat. I'm just going to invite my colleague from Barnet Climate Action Group, Tony Sarche, just to give a kind of flavour. Tony, you've got around about 90 seconds or so.
Thanks, Ed. Hi, everyone. Tony asked if we should declare a climate emergency. Angie talked about terraced houses and how can they be arranged so that they can charge electric cars using their own solar panels. Ben talked about ventilation being inefficient, and will Dan's grant ensure ventilation is safe and affordable? Sri said that green home grants are not advertised very well and difficult to apply for. Can that be rectified? There was a discussion between Julia Irons and I think Alan about which of the Lib Dems and Labour voted against the Edmonton incinerator. I'm not sure if that was clarified. And several people commented on the question of collecting food waste from flats, that people hadn't had it collected, and therefore that would have lowered the statistics for take up of the scheme.
Tony, that was fantastic. So it was a fairly lively session there on the chat column. I do encourage participants to carry on. I'm just going to take Chairman's prerogative just to give 2 quick thoughts. One is a plea to all candidates to mention the threat of fuel poverty and rising energy bills is a real challenge. And though I gave the figure for the energy bill increases may be affecting a quarter of our households in Barnet, in some boroughs, it will be as much as 50%. So in those boroughs where there are households on lower incomes, it will impact them much more severely. So please do all take account of that. And just the point about anaerobic digestion, which I'm glad was mentioned in the questions that were submitted as part of this event. Do you remember anaerobic digestion manufactures renewable gas? There's not a day that goes on since Ukraine was invaded and when we've talked about gas consumption and making more gas at home. And if you're going to make more gas at home, you might as well make it renewable gas from food waste rather than fossil gas. Thank you to all for your time. I'm going to pass you over to my colleague Ruth Rahman now, talking about net zero. Over to you, Ruth.
Thank you, Saeed. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Ruth from Friends of the Earth Barnet. We're a local group who meet once a month to discuss local environmental concerns and our current campaigns. Meetings are open and we welcome new members. Dave, who is supporting me in the chat area, is my co-member, and he's going to post a link to join our group if anyone is interested. In this section, we have 2 questions for the candidates on achieving net zero in Barnet. And the candidate order is as follows. First is Alan, followed by David, then Dan, and then Sachin. Question 1. How are you going to engage with local communities to make a difference in reaching net zero over the next 4 years? Many local groups are striving to do this already. For example, I'm a member of an environmental committee of a local residents association, and they're taking well-considered action to take their suburb to net zero. How will you support groups like this to run initiatives around renewable energy, insulation, food and waste efficiency, and provide information and awareness to the wider community? So Alan, over to you.
Thanks, Ruth. This is a great question because it's so important to engage with local communities, and that's something the Conservatives in Barnet have been so bad at. Their approach to so many issues is to consult and then just ignore the responses. On climate change, of course, we need action at a national and international level, but there is so much that can and needs to be done at a local level. I know the Hampstead Garden Suburb Residents Association's got a committee that working on actions to get to net zero, and there are lots of other residents and other groups that are doing the same. We would want to involve these groups and others in the Citizens' Assembly on climate change and biodiversity that we would set up. We will also want to appoint a lead councillor and lead officer with specific responsibility for sustainability and who will be able to give practical support to all the great work that local groups are doing. And to pick one area, there's a lot more we can do with the council's website to promote and provide resources that support initiatives, including on renewable energy and food waste. Above all, we want to collaborate with the community organisations and local businesses to deliver outcomes that contribute to net zero. And we'll work with communities to develop a comprehensive communication strategy and engagement plan around sustainability. Part of that engagement plan is to roll out neighbourhood community hubs, which can be a localised focus for providing guidance, advice and hosting events on sustainability for residents and community groups. Thank you.
That's great. That's great. Thank you, Alan. Over to you, David.
Thank you. Once again, the Labour Party is adopting long-standing Green Party policy on having community involvement and citizens' assemblies to discuss these issues. And I'm very happy to hear that. But what I'd like to say is that we believe in participatory democracy, and a Green local council would make sure that community groups are not just given box-ticking consultations, but are actually involved in decision-making, and that initiatives by local groups are supported by the council. As is shown by the Lewis model for retrofitting that I discussed earlier, working together with local groups is not only gets more participation, but it is also more cost efficient. We would support local environmental actions and engage with relevant bodies and where changes need to be made. And I know that when it comes to Hampstead Garden Suburb, the fact that they're a conservation area is hindering some of their attempts to make improvements. And we'd look into whether that could be altered in some way without destroying the special nature of the area, but to allow residents to do more to make their homes more efficient.
That's great. Thank you very much. Dan, over to you.
Thank you. So I think when we have these groups around the borough willing to proactively work with us, I think it's great, and I think they also help mobilise people who perhaps we wouldn't otherwise reach as a council. Councillor Schneiderman suggests that we don't listen to consultations, but I could give several examples over the years of us amending proposals, having taken into account community feedback. I think what he means is that we may not completely rescind a proposal because of feedback. Well, if we believe that something's right, then that's why we propose it. That's why we implement these things. But we do change them, and we do implement. We make changes as a result of feedback. I think it's quite unfair to say that. What we can't do is satisfy everybody, and that's the reality of local government. Unfortunately, you can't please everybody. But look, we'll be inviting all interested residents, groups, organisations to participate in the consultation for the sustainability strategy. We'll have face-to-face group meetings, online events, street stalls. We'll gladly accept submissions from groups. If there's a demand for materials and resources for community groups to use, amongst the community, then they're very happy to set aside a budget for that as well.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you. And lastly, Sachin.
When I hear the Tories and Labour discuss consultations, strategies, engagement plans, citizens' assemblies and the like, I hear a lot of talk of dithering. And the Liberal Democrats are at heart an extremely local and devolution heavy kind of party. And we will get out there and absolutely focus on talking to the groups that are already doing great work and helping them scale up further. We want to look at things like, say no to plastics N2, and think about how can we expand the remit of that group to maybe look at, for example, rolling out deposit and return cup schemes. We want to take some of the good practice that's been done in terms of school streets and again see how we can actually make that more scalable. We want to help those schools work with their neighbouring residential areas and say, okay, what measures do you want to put in place? How can the council be the coordinating body to facilitate that? We want to look at how we can use groups like Power Up North London, for example, to look at community heat pump projects. So we want to really focus on actual action, and I want to really move aside from this, infighting and squabbling between Councillor Schneiderman and Thomas over the success or failure of consultation and engagement. We've got concrete examples of proposals that we would look to, that have already shown good potential in sort of pilots. How do we actually ramp that up and make that, sort of viable across the borough?
That's great, thank you. And thank you for keeping to time. So on to the next question. The actions needed to transition to net zero should address inequalities and improve social cohesion, whilst also providing accountable and sustainable outcomes. For instance, the incinerator in Edmonton is a necessary aspect of waste management, but with low recycling rates and food waste uncollected, we are creating the need for the expansion of the incinerator rather than exploring sustainable ways to dispose of waste we create. How will you be accountable for making decisions in the future that will get Barnet to net zero and support that adaptation on an ongoing basis? Okay, so it's the same order as before. So Alan, you're first.
Oh, okay, thank you, Ruth. We're committed, Barnet Labour's committed to tackling inequality and improving social cohesion. In terms of accountability, the Citizens' Assembly that we plan will set up, will co-produce and importantly monitor the delivery of an ambitious sustainability strategy and climate action plan. And part of that Assembly's job will be to ensure that everyone can benefit from green growth and that no one is held back. And that's real community involvement and accountability that goes far, far beyond the 90-minute one-off sustainability workshops that the council's held so far, with the opportunity to write comments down on some non-recyclable post-it notes. I mean, it's no wonder the council still doesn't have a sustainability strategy, still just a framework which may eventually lead to a strategy. It's just, too little, too late. If the Tories put as much effort into tackling climate change as they do into partying, just think what they could achieve. With regards to waste, we don't want to see waste incinerated, which is why we'll focus on helping people reduce waste in the first place and then reuse and recycle it, which is why we want to bring back the separate food waste collection service, promote and encourage composting, work to stop single-use plastics in Barnet, and we'll bring back the community skip service to tackle fly tipping, enabling people to dispose of bulky items. This was a hugely popular service scrapped by the Tories, but it's not just about disposal. I went on to visit a similar scheme in Brent, and it's amazing how many people were using it. But just as some people were dropping off stuff, other people were picking stuff up. And in fact, I just missed out on a lovely flower pot. So that's another example of how we'll promote the reuse economy.
Okay, thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
David?
Well, it's a core principle of green politics that environmental justice and social justice go hand in hand, and you can't have measures that are meant to improve the environment that actually make life more difficult for people, or for people who are particularly at the lower end of the income scale. And that's why Green Party policies such as universal basic income, that might not sound like it's an environmental policy, actually would contribute to improving the environment by taking people away from jobs that are just wasteful and allowing people time to express themselves and to grow themselves, rather than just taking part in an economy that is building for nothing. So local authorities don't have complete control over the production and manufacture and distribution of goods and services, but where they can implement their own controls into reducing the creation of waste, reducing packaging, reducing things like that, so that there is less waste to be processed. And then when the waste is taken away, making sure that it is recycled properly. And that means, as other speakers have said, reintroducing curbside separation of different recyclables so that they're not just all mixed up together, and then the sorting becomes very difficult if the sorting takes place at all, and if it isn't just dumped into the incinerator. The incinerator itself is an admission of failure, because it's just creating more and more pollution in a very deprived part of North London. So we're completely against the expansion.
All right, thank you, David. And Dan, over to you.
We would introduce what's called a library of things, where people who perhaps can't afford certain items, perhaps a jet washer, or whatever it may be, a hedge trimmer, or things like that, and it could be anything. They could go online and borrow that. And I know most people, you think, well, perhaps they'll borrow it from their neighbours or what have you, but that isn't always the case. Look, we will introduce that. It'll be a small thing that would help people perhaps, use things that they otherwise wouldn't have access to or be able to afford to buy for themselves. And actually, it is a crying shame. A lot of people have, tools and things in their sheds that they only use, a couple of times a year. So I think it's a really important thing that we help that. But the answer talks about how will you be accountable for decisions in the future. And to answer that directly, whoever's making the decisions to get to net zero will be accountable at the ballot box. It's as simple as that, locally and nationally. On recycling rates, the Environment Act sets out very high targets for recycling packaging. So the intention is that we will be collecting more recycling simply as a result of more packaging being recyclable. But our Barnet plan also contains targets. Those targets are monitored at committees throughout the year at the town hall, in public, and that's an opportunity for councillors or your...
Oh, Dan, you've just dropped off there. Okay, both his video and sound have gone, so I'll just pause his time there. He's got 20 seconds left. For now, Sachin, can I hand over to you to... Oh, he's back on. Dan, do you want to wrap up? You've got 20 seconds left on your question.
So I don't know what happened there, but it's just to say that it was on accountability. We're accountable at the ballot box ultimately, and obviously that's every 4 years. In the meantime, at the town hall, we have committees that monitor our progress against the targets, against our progress against net zero, and councillors and members of the public can come along and ask questions and challenge us. Okay,
thank you. Sachin, over to you finally.
Yes, I find Councillor Thomas's focus on the library of things, slightly trivial point. Borrowing a jet washer or a hedge trimmer is fundamentally quite a middle class concern. When we have a plan to when the two major parties are hell bent on pursuing this incinerator, which is going to be an act of environmental racism, and as David Farbey points out, in an extremely deprived part of London. I'm glad this question talks about accountability. Barnet Liberal Democrats will give climate change the focus it deserves. We will declare a climate emergency on day one, and we will accelerate the delivery of that net zero strategy and make it a reality via an expanded Environment, Clean Air and Sustainable Transport Committee. Leading from the front, a Liberal Democrat Barnet will phase out diesel from the council's supply chain and freight, and we will commit to encouraging planet-friendly choices in terms of food and drink on council premises. So those are some of the sort of tangible examples of how we're going to really make this, sort of our lookout. But I also think we need to step up that fight against the incinerator. We need to do things like bringing back separated recycling, because people find it absolutely bizarre that as David points out, the waste is of such low quality because it's all sort of intermingled that it is ultimately being incinerated. So I think, accountability is more than just sort of saying we throw it back to the ballot box. It's about actually embedding the environment and the climate emergency into everything the council is doing. And that goes, right through our manifesto that we've produced, which looks at a range of topics through the lens of the environment.
Thank you. Thank you, Sachin. I'm just going to hand over briefly to my co-member Dave, who's going to just give a summary of what's been happening in the chat area during that conversation.
Thanks, Ruth. Yeah, some interesting things around clearly engagement against consultation sparked off some dialogue going on, and really good interaction between the people on the chat. Questions about cars and travel, hold those because we've got a session on that coming up, put some good things on that. The accountability question, fascinating also about how do you hold accountable businesses in the community, in the local area? How do we hold those accountable for their impact on the environment, which I felt was an interesting thing. And some good links people are posting to access about information for grants, various other links that are in there. So please look at the chat, help each other answer the questions, and let's move on quickly.
Okay, thank you, Dave. So yeah, thank you all for your answers. They're all very interesting, especially around engaging with local communities and accountability. So now I'm going to hand over the next to the next section, which is chaired by Roger.
Thanks very much, Ruth. Appreciate that. Good evening, everyone. Good to see you all. My name is Roger Chapman. I am chair of the Barnet Green Spaces Network. This is a network which was established in July 2019, and it's open to all Friends of Parks and Open Spaces groups in the Barnet. Currently, we've got about 40 groups in the network with some 5,000 members with there. We've produced a Green Spaces manifesto, which has gone to all the local political parties, and I think has just been, the link to that has just been put in the chat if you want to have a look at that. I'm being helped out tonight by Suzanne King from the Friends of Finchley Way Open Space, and she's going to be looking up at the chat and referring to that at the end. So I want to thank all those people who have submitted questions in advance, and from those we again have taken 2 areas, and I'll move on to those in a second. As the candidates know, the order I'm going to take you in is Sachin first for Liberal Democrats, Dan Thomas for the Conservative second, David Farbey for Greens third, and finally Alan Schneiderman for the Labour Party. So with that in mind, the first question we've got is on pesticide and herbicide use and is as follows. Barnet has the highest level of pesticide and herbicide use in our parks, open spaces and verges in London. Is this good for human health and biodiversity? What approach to pesticide use and biodiversity will you take in the next 4 years? So with your 1.5 minutes to start now, over to you, Sachin.
Thanks, Roger. Well, look, in a word, is the overuse of pesticide and herbicides, good for human health and biodiversity? No. We know that Barnet has been a real backslider, and in particular, some of our MPs, in terms of, the sort of quality of our soil and waterways. What I would say on this actually is, the Liberal Democrats have been really leading the charge in terms of issues like, the pumping of sort of sewage into water. And I believe that we've just, had sort of elected representatives speaking on this topic earlier this week. We want to, really sort of take pride in our natural waterways, support local groups and properly sort of empower them that look after streams, rivers and surrounding parks. We recognise that there's fantastic work going on by some of the Friends of groups that you mentioned, and we want to make sure that what they're doing is more widely known, attracts more volunteers, that sort of thing, but also that as a council we need to take much greater responsibility in this. We can't just leave it to voluntary groups to sort of mop up the mess that we have created in local government. Finally, I would say that on biodiversity, yes, we agree that we need to do more in this area. We would look at things, for example, pocket parks and the like on some of our sort of social housing, public realm. What we really are worried about is the fact that sort of perceived low quality kind of green space on estates is just allowed to sort of descend into a cycle of decline because the council much prefers to sort of build on and expand,
Thanks, Sachin.
Sorry, thanks. Oh, sure, okay. Sure.
Thanks for that. Okay, thank you for that. On to Dan Thomas.
Thank you, Roger. So I don't know where the figure of us having the highest sort of levels of pesticides in London comes from. And we have an awful lot of parks. We are a big borough, and we have a lot of parks, and we have a lot of pavements that our residents expect to be weed-free. But look, Roger, if you've got any alternatives that are just as effective and are kinder to the environment, then I'd be very happy to pilot these in sections of the borough And if they are just as effective, I think it would be absolutely fine to use them. We don't put our street scene and green spaces teams have reviewed it. They have tried alternatives, and what we're using now is the best. It's more effective, and we have to spray the weeds several times a year to make sure they don't grow back. When weeds start to grow between the pavements, again, we get criticised. The borough looks run down. There's weeds growing. What's happening? So, you know, the council hasn't got an easy job here. You know, one sense we want to be environmentally friendly, of course we do. On the other, our residents expect sort of gleaming streets. So, look, I would welcome your help with this if you've got anything that we can use.
Okay, thanks for that, Dan. We'll come back to you on that one, certainly will. But I think in the chat, we put the link to where that particular figures came from. It was a Pesticides Action Network Freedom of Information request to all London boroughs. So that's where it's come from. But thanks for those quick.
Thank you.
Quotes. Okay, next on to David.
Well, the question is, what do I think of using herbicides and pesticides? Of course, I don't want them. I think a Green Council would try and act to eliminate as much as possible and try and eliminate them completely. There are lots of creative and environmentally friendly ways of dealing with green spaces, open spaces, and so on. I would like to see the money spent rather on staff for our parks and open spaces rather than on chemicals, which can be dangerous to wildlife and to human residents as well. That would be an absolute policy that the Green Party would undertake. And as people have been pointing out on the chat, there are lots of organisations offering lots of solutions, and that Councillor Thomas could take time to read, and the Barnet Borough could take time to implement, but they choose not to. They choose to do something that is quick and cheap and easy and doesn't involve thought and doesn't involve taking care of the environment. And I'm sorry about that, and I'd like to change it.
Thanks very much. Okay, if we move on then to in this section, over to you, Alan.
Thank you, Roger. I mean, the simple answer to the question is no. And as has been quoted, that report by the Pesticide Action Network did find that Barnet is one of the biggest users of pesticides and herbicides. If elected, Barnet Labour Council will ban glyphosate use in Barnet. Councillor Thomas talks about alternatives, but I've tried in the Environment Committee numerous times to put forward alternatives and tell them which other authorities to have a look at, but nothing happens and nothing's been done. If we win the election, we will employ a permanent biodiversity officer to work with local environment groups to develop a proper borough-wide biodiversity strategy. This will cover not just the Welsh Harp at the precious SSSI site, but the whole borough. We want to plant more trees and look for areas where we can promote rewilding. I put forward a motion to Environment Committee that led to the establishment of a tiny forest alongside the North Circular Road that brings the benefits of a forest, such as tree cover for wildlife, biodiversity, capturing carbon and reducing flooding, but in an urban friendly size. And it's so rare to be able to put forward an idea, we're so rare in Barnet, to be able to put forward an idea promoted by the community groups, get it voted through at council and actually see it come to fruition. It's actually a great example of how the council and the community can work together. And I know many people here tonight were, helped to do the planting.
Thanks, Alan.
Labour will have a far more proactive approach to promoting biodiversity.
Right, got to cut you off there. Thank you very much indeed, Alan. Okay, well, thanks for those answers. Moving on to question 2 then. Planning permission has been granted for a 200-metre pedestrian bridge over the Silk Stream at Brent Reservoir. The bridge will impact on both a site of special scientific interest and designated metropolitan open land. If such key designations can be ignored, what hope is there for the protection of any open space in the borough, and especially those that are of low quality and low value as set out in the 2016 Barnet Open Space Strategy? So first off, Sachin.
There's an echo, Roger.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, carry on.
Okay, I'm glad Councillor Schneiderman supports the tiny forest on the edge of Gardiner Suburb ward, and in fact it is one of the Liberal Democrat candidates in the Gardiner Suburb who has led the charge on that tiny forest. In terms of your question, Roger, I think there's a couple of things I would say on this. First of all, in terms of the sort of focus on the areas set out in the open space strategy, I'd want to look again actually at whether we are focusing on the right areas, because what I see, and I mentioned in a previous question, is that actually the council has decided to sort of not invest in low quality, low value land. And I think that's really to the detriment of people who live in those areas. That they see essentially a sort of lack of focus on those types of spaces. In terms of, what we can do to actually, really promote proper protection of these kinds of, designations. I mean, look, nationally, we've got a Tory party that really has very little time for sort of rules and petty things like designations and rules. So I imagine we will get more of the same at a local level. So clearly we need to properly enforce these kinds of designations. The other thing I would say is that we really need to take pride in the sort of greenery of our, suburban borough. Something tangibly I think we should do is look at how we can promote signage, for example, on the capital ring. We need to make people more aware of the fantastic greenery we have and what we can do to protect and improve it. Thanks.
Okay, thanks a lot. Cheers, Sachin, for that. Okay, next on to Dan.
Well, I don't know how the Lib Dems can say they want to, they're more pride in green areas when all their councillors want to review the green belt and build on the green belt, and Barnet is a third green belt. So I wouldn't trust them with any open space. The same for Labour. Barnet Labour Council proposed to de-designate 400 acres of green belts to be built on, some of which would be an industrial zone. Even Sadiq Khan told them that they shouldn't do it. So again, I don't think you can trust the Labour Party either. But we won't build on the green belt. We've made that a manifesto commitment, and on the Welsh Harp, on the bridge down there, that bridge, at the planning application for the bridge did contain an ecology study. It wasn't ignored. In fact, it was that led to us securing several hundreds thousands of pounds to do things in the Harp, for instance, to remove invasive species. And there are ecology reports due at every stage of the bridge, and that will pay for some work and restoration down there, and to enhance biodiversity. So whilst there will be a bridge built which will help access across the bridge and access to open spaces, and for residents to enjoy views across the Harp, there will be benefits as well for ecology.
Okay, thanks very much, Dan. Okay, on to David.
I'm afraid I don't know the details of the particular planning application that's referenced in your question, but the idea that the Tory party is going to protect green spaces is a bit far-fetched. They are known for redesignating metropolitan open land within the borough for development, which they shouldn't be doing. The idea that you can define some green spaces as low value and low quality is laughable. We've seen over the last 2 years how valuable for every single person in the community it is to have green spaces nearby. It's been an unfortunate reason that's led us to that conclusion, but we must see it, and we must start investing in all our green spaces and protect them as much as we can. When it comes to the green belt, I want to say that the Green Party policy is to protect the green belt from urban development. But if there is something coming along that will, for example, provide energy production that can make use of the green belt, then that's something that should be considered. So no to housing on the green belt, but yes to looking at ways of using it to support action on climate.
Thanks very much indeed. Okay, and finally in this section, Alan.
It's difficult to speak and type at the same time. Thank you, Roger. The bridge over the Welsh Harp should never have been...
Oh, you've gone on mute, Alan.
Sorry, I just trod on my speaker. The bridge over the Welsh Harp should never have been granted planning permission. The scale of this proposed 186-metre bridge will do irreparable harm to the fragile habitat of the North Marsh, and that harm will be compounded by the need to light the bridge to enable people to cross safely. Labour councillors have already been talking to council officers and to the developer Barrett's, and would talk to Natural England as well. I hope that a solution can be found, and that's what a Labour council would be working for. I know there are potential mitigations, but the developer scrapping the bridge and providing a Section 106 contribution instead would be the best way forward. But beyond the Welsh Harp, we will protect the green belt, our parks and open spaces. We'll introduce a dedicated park ranger service and make sure that everyone's got access to green space. I know that the Barnet Lib Dems don't like the green belt, and that the Lib Dem leader said at a recent meeting that he had a distaste for the green belt, but unlike the Lib Dems, we won't build on the green belt. We will also scrap the Conservatives' low quality, low value category of green spaces. They're only low quality because of the Tory neglect, and they're only considered low value by the Tories, not by the residents who live around them, walk across them or play on them. And just to finish, we do support the Barnet Green Space Network Manifesto, and we'll work to implement it, to deliver it with them.
Okay, thank you, Alan. Thank you to all the speakers there for that session. Can I ask Suzanne now to come in and let us know what's been going on in the chat?
Yeah, well, it's got quite lively in the chat. There's been some stuff about people preferring to have the streets cleaned rather than weeded. Education on biodiversity, the importance of wildflowers for biodiversity. One point about whether there's going to be any plans to restrict digging up front gardens and paving them over. Quite a lot of debate about building on the green belt and other green spaces. And somebody pointed out the health value of open spaces, and somebody else has pointed out that some of the footpath signs are missing around Barnet as well. So quite a few issues, and people are having quite a good debate between themselves about it as well.
That's lovely. Thanks very much indeed, Suzanne. Appreciate that. And thank you once again to the speakers. And that wraps up this particular session. So moving on, I move on to active travel, and I believe Jess is taking over from me on that one. So Jess, all yours.
Hello, and thank you, Roger. And I'm here representing Better Streets for Barnet. So just a very quick summary about Better Streets for Barnet is that we want to ask the borough, what is our vision? What is our direction of travel? In light of some of the following points, our population, according to the Barnet Plan, is projected to increase from 400,000 at the moment up to 450,000 by 2036, 13%. Also,
yes, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you're awfully quiet. If you're able just to get a bit closer maybe, or project. Thank you.
Is that better, Wendy? Can you
I
hear
think
me now?
that is a bit better, yeah, hopefully. Thank you.
Great. So we are concerned about population growth in the borough, projected population growth, and we're also concerned about the fact that Barnet is low down in the tables of safety for Greater London in terms of cycle accidents and also pedestrian accidents. So where are we going? Are we going with more cars and more cars and more cars? Or are we as a borough going to create a vision where active travel is actually possible, where people are safe to walk and safe to cycle, in light of the fact that 72% of people surveyed by a YouGov polling in 2021 believe that we should all drive less to save the planet. So what is our vision and how are we going to become healthier and more climate safe and more active as a borough? So our first question is as follows. The Barnet long-term transport strategy emphasises active travel. However, recently 2 school street schemes have been abandoned. Area traffic management schemes in Brunswick Park, Colindale and Burnt Oak have been abandoned. The A1000 cycle scheme has been significantly downgraded, and the Quiet Way cycle route from North Finchley to Hornsey has been stalled for 2 years. So, candidates, how are you going to implement active travel in the future? And please, can we start with our Green colleague, David Farbey?
Well, thank you very much. Barnet Council is very good at talking the talk on active travel, but as you've pointed out, it's not carrying through the actions necessary. So the Green Party would absolutely support an improvement to active travel policies within Barnet. We recognise that in a large open borough like Barnet, implementing some of these policies is quite difficult, and we have to engage with Transport for London in terms of maintaining and improving public transport services across our borough, as well as developing more cycle lanes, more safe walking routes for schools and so on. It must be done in consultation with residents, and I would even go so far as to say that a Green-led council in Barnet would consider introducing low traffic neighbourhoods. And I know that they've been very controversial in Enfield, but I think they've been introduced poorly and without enough consultation. And they are being used there as a money spinner by fining people who go down the wrong way. But the idea is to reduce traffic and reduce the need for people to use private cars. And that's something that we need to look into and we need to work on. Getting people out of their cars is good for them and good for the planet.
Thank you very much. Now can we have Sachin?
Yeah, thanks, Jess. Look, Barnet Liberal Democrats are proud to be putting active transport at the heart of our plans. We are the only party in Barnet Council to actually be, sticking up for and standing up for the A1000 cycle lane. We're really disappointed that Labour and the Conservatives have basically washed their hands of the problem, having implemented it poorly and without properly consulting with the neighbouring roads. They're now trying to sort of shirk any responsibility for it by basically dismantling it. And the Liberal Democrats have written to the council pointing out how this will be really harmful for pedestrians and cyclists. But we want to go further. We know that we can't just put one cycle lane and expect that to change behaviour comprehensively. We want to plan a network of segregated cycle lanes, giving cyclists more protection, easing congestion for drivers, and improving air quality for everyone. We also want to look at cycle storage facilities. We know we have huge shortfalls and waiting lists for things like bike hangers, especially on our estates. We don't have any hoops on lampposts, those sorts of wider changes that will really encourage cycling. We also want to make our streets better for walking. We want to bring up the standard of pavements so everyone can use them safely and comfortably, and that includes better lighting, like the improvements in the causeway footpath in East Finchley, and also things like more benches so that they're more inclusive for older people, people with mobility problems, and pregnant people. We want to make streets more welcoming. So look, we full-heartedly support active transport measures. We think this A1000 cycle lane has been divisive, more in terms of how it's been planned and executed, because when we talk to people on the doorstep, they all sort of say, actually, we're really in favour of cycling. We just want to see it implemented properly. And we know that that's more than just implementing one cycle lane on a short piece of road, watching as it causes lots of disruption and then washing your hands of the problem.
Right, thank you. For that. And finally, and Alan, please.
Thank you, Jess. As part of our active travel plans, we are committed to improving road safety, particularly around schools, and to encouraging walking and cycling. This includes working on a programme of safe street audits to help identify road safety hotspots and work in partnership with residents to address these and make our streets safer. Around two people a week are killed or seriously injured on Barnet's roads. And so we want to make it far easier to get 20-mile-an-hour zones where residents want them. On the A1000 cycle lane, and the recent changes to it have all been done quickly, on the cheap, and with inadequate consultation, and it clearly shows. We want to work with cycling groups and other residents to get a better scheme on the A1000, and we also want to look at the part that routes off of main roads could play. To encourage cycling, you also need safe storage, but yet again, Barnet's lagging behind. During lockdown, Camden and Brent installed over 30 bike hangers. Barnet installed none. There are still only 2 in the whole of Barnet.
20 seconds.
We want all measures to have support within the community, which is why we won't be imposing low traffic neighbourhoods. Finally, we want to develop and campaign on Clean Air for Barnet pledge, join the London-wide anti-idling scheme to help reduce air pollution. It's amazing the Tories are the only London borough to refuse to join this. I think they thought it referred to Tory councillors rather than their vehicles. Thank you.
All right, Alan, thank you. And Dan.
Thank you. So Enfield Council spent £40 million on a segregated cycle lane, and there is no convincing evidence that that has increased cycling and increased cycling to a level that warrants £40 million being spent. Until we have enough evidence that that kind of investment works and that it doesn't cause congestion, then we will continue with smaller experimental schemes. For example, the A1000. If we didn't believe in active travel or didn't want to see active travel grow, we wouldn't have had the experimental cycle lane down there. We're learning from that. I think what we have to do is in Barnet as well, we have to accept that our residents, because we're an outer London borough, a lot of them do rely on the car. So, carers who go door to door. We have a lot of elderly residents who require care. Carers who go door to door, they can't do that via the bus or the tube. They need to be in a car and to get there quickly. And quite often it is the more cheaper option to get around. And we have large families in Barnet, and you can't do a large shop on the bus or on a bike. So we're realistic, but we do want to encourage people to not use their cars and leave them at home. That's why building schemes near tube stations and transport hubs have far fewer parking spaces, and that's why there are more and more new developments with car sharing schemes being built as well. But we have to carry people with us.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
And the next question is, so, given the possible expansion of the ULEZ to the whole of Greater London in a bid to improve air quality, plus the axing of bus services in Barnet, such as the 84 in the north of the borough, how are you going to encourage residents to leave their cars at home? And can we start again with David Farbey? Thank you.
Thank you. The Green Party is very much in favour of expanding the ultra-low emission zone to cover the whole of London, and would also favour reduced speed limits wherever possible. We've seen that in neighbouring boroughs, and that seems to be working quite well. This is not a war on drivers. This is not banning cars. This is asking everyone to consider using their cars less and thinking about what journeys are really necessary. Between 30 and 40% of Barnet residents do not have access to a private car. So it is really wrong for Barnet's travel policy to focus so much on, almost exclusively, on car owners and car users. I know that part of their sustainability strategy from the Tory party is more electric vehicle charging points, but electric vehicles are only a transitional solution before we get to something much better, because when you drive an electric vehicle, you're creating particulate pollution, which is just as dangerous, if not more dangerous, than exhaust fumes. So it's important.
20 seconds.
We need to engage with Transport for London, Hertfordshire County Council, to make sure better public transport is available as well. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And Sachin, please.
Sure. I think the comments and the actions of Labour and the Tories on things like the A1000 cycle lane really speak volumes as to how they are both actually still in the car first mentality, talking about, changing and dismantling and worsening a cycle lane for the benefit of motorists. That ignores the longer term thing that we need to do, which is to get people out of cars. Barnet Liberal Democrats have a range of ideas that we would want to put into practice to make this more of a reality. I've mentioned the measures that we would take in terms of making cycling safer and looking at the supporting infrastructure for it to really encourage people to get on their bikes for journeys where that's practical. We want to make streets safer and better for walking, so that again, more of our community can enjoy the health benefits of walking, and also the fact that many journeys are doable on foot. We also want to look a lot at encouraging active transport to and from schools. So I touched on it earlier, but we want to help schools work with their neighbourhoods to create school streets and other measures that encourage pupils to travel by active methods of transport. On the ULEZ, I think the ULEZ and the Liberal Democrats take this view that it is quite a blunt instrument. We support more dynamic proposals like flexible road pricing, for example. And we know that, having this sort of hard cut-off point at the minute on the North Circular just clumps the problem.
Seconds.
But I do, in principle, support its expansion. It's a powerful tool that we have, as blunt as it may be.
Thank you very much, Sachin. And next, Alan, how is Labour going to encourage Barnet citizens to leave their cars at home?
Thank you, Jess. We do want to encourage residents to leave their cars at home, and we will, for instance, encourage Tory councillors to get out their cars by taking away the free parking permits that they've given themselves. I talked a lot earlier about cycling, so I could say a bit more about walking now. The average journey to school is less than 1 kilometre, which is a 10-minute walk. So we want to work towards all schools having accredited travel plans, which supports pupils' well-being, reducing congestion and improving road safety and air quality. We want to encourage walking with better signage for walkways, green spaces, and also that will be helped by faster and better repairs to the shocking state of our pavements. We will invest in safer crossings, identified hotspots, by working with residents and walk safe campaigns to ensure everybody is safe when crossing Barnet's roads. We do want to encourage the use of public transport. We'll continue to support plans for an orbital rail service in Barnet and work with TfL to push for improvements to bus routes in the borough. It's great that thanks to the Mayor of London, we've already got electric buses on the route 183 from Golders Green and hydrogen buses on the 245 running between Cricklewood and Golders Green. The 84 route quoted in the question is not a TfL route, and we need more government funding for local authorities to fund bus services such as the 84, as we also need a proper sustainable funding settlement for TfL to enable services to be increased.
Sorry, Alan, I didn't give you a warning, but that was your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Dan, how is the Tory party going to encourage Barnet citizens to leave their cars at home?
I think there are two types of journey that we need to sort of address. There's the sort of the commuting, going to work, or going into town, or going, sort of cross London. And for that, we really do need TfL to invest in better bus networks. It can take me as little as 17 minutes to drive from one edge of the borough, from Edgware right the way across to East Barnet, Cockfosters. If I was to do the same journey via bus, it could take double, sometimes triple the time. So I think there needs to be something done, particularly for east-west routes on the bus network, and we need to work with the Mayor of London to get better bus coverage in outer London boroughs to make that easier. We all know that our tube network in the main goes north-south, and it doesn't help with the number of services going sort of to Zone 5 stations are less now that trains sort of regulate and stop at Golders Green more. Or other, other stations to regulate at the end of the service earlier. So I think we need to look at that, and perhaps we need maybe fewer off-peak services and to substitute for that. I don't know. We'd have to look at that. And I think we need to make more of the 15-minute walk to your local town centre rather than driving. I think walking and cycling to your local town centre has its benefits. We need to think about the messaging. Some people will do it to save the environment. Some people will do it for their own fitness, to get their steps up, that kind of thing. Experiment with different messaging. Thank you.
Okay, Dan, thanks very much. Now, Janine, are you there? Janine's my assistant who has been monitoring the chat.
Hello, it won't let me put my video on for some unknown reason.
No worries.
But that's okay. Yes, I'm Janine. I'm from Wild About Our Woods, and we create more opportunities across Barnet for people to gather in local woodlands for mutual well-being. So there's been, on the chat, there's been some really interesting conversations that have been had. There were some earlier ones in one of the other questions, so I brought those in. Chris was talking about why we don't have a 20-mile-an-hour zone to reduce emissions and improve safety. He was saying that, you know, lots of people have been pushing for it, schools and communities, and why is it they can do it in Islington but they can't do it in Barnet? Gillian was asking why Barnet has so few car sharing club points, which would encourage people to give up their cars. And then in the question to the active travel, there were people that are saying that the cycle lane is now really dangerous and unusable. Sylvan was saying we really need to improve public transport to get us out of our cars. And Charlie and Michelle agreed that, especially for those that have access issues, public transport really needs to be improved, not just about cycling. And then Ruth was asking, you know, if we are going to spread the electrifying buses across Barnet, because she sees that as a real answer to one of the issues, really. That's it.
Thanks very much, Janine. It's clear that most of the parties want really tangible routes to encourage people to leave cars behind, and there are very real things that can be done. Whether it's my family has just got rid of our car, we're much healthier, we have a car club around the corner, so there are lots of things that can be done, which also needs to be central government. But we don't want Carmageddon in Barnet. We want healthy streets, we want healthy people, and we're looking forward to a better transport future. Thank you.
Thank you, Jess. Well, I'm slightly blown away by all the information we've been given this evening. I don't know about anyone else. I've not managed to keep up with the chat, so we will be downloading that afterwards. And if anyone wants to take a copy of it themselves now and you're on a computer, if you all know about the little 3 dots, if you click on the 3 dots, that will save the chat to your own computer so you can read it later and look at the links. Although I think we will make sure that you at least get the links. We might not be able to send the whole thing. Quite a few people have been posting some great chats, but they've sent them just to panelists and hosts, including some of our panelists. So you may have been thinking you were typing to everybody, but unfortunately it's not gone to all. So I'll do my best to make sure that information is shared afterwards, but technology may not make it fully possible. So we are now 5 minutes away. We may just go a couple of minutes over because I want to give all of our candidates a chance to wrap up. But we're coming to the end of the event, and it's given me lots of food for thought. So I hope it has given you too. We're going to invite each of the candidates to make a closing statement now of up to a minute each to let us know what their main priority of all the many topics that we've talked about this evening. What is their main priority going to be to ensure that the borough meets its climate change targets if they are elected into office? And this time we're going to go in reverse surname alphabetical order. Start with you, please, Dan.
Thank you. So I think our main priority, of course, is to hit our net zero target by 2030. And to do that, as a council, we already have a plan to decarbonise the council estate, to generate electricity from solar panels on our buildings, and yes, and again utilising government grants to decarbonise our estate. But thinking more widely about the borough, most of the borough's carbon footprint is from domestic homes, and we'll be calling on the government to provide more money for the Green Homes Grant, to expand it to include more homes, and also to help our social housing partners as well as housing associations to retrofit the stock. It really does. The domestic homes are a big priority in Barnet, and whilst the council as an organisation is important to decarbonise, we need to show leadership for our residential properties.
Thank you, perfect timing. I think I've confused matters with the 3 dots, so don't worry about that if you can't find it. It may only be for the panelists. I will try and provide that information afterwards. And we're going to hear from Alan, please, next.
Thanks, Wendy, and thanks again to everyone who's organised tonight's hustings. On May the 5th, there is a choice between more of the same from the Conservatives, the neglect of our borough and the failure to take urgent action on the climate emergency. Or you can vote for real change. Labour's got an ambitious vision for Barnet and a comprehensive programme of action to make Barnet cleaner, greener and safer, including declaring an immediate climate emergency. to show that we're serious about tackling climate change. And the Citizens' Assembly will set up will involve local people and other groups to deliver an ambitious climate action plan. It's a new way of working, well, for Barnet anyway, and it means involving, listening and working with the community, including, I'm sure, everyone on this call tonight. There's only so much you can say in 60 seconds, well, in this final statement. Please visit barnetlabour.org to find out more, have a read of our manifesto, and make sure you're fully informed before you cast your vote on May the 5th. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Sachin?
Thank you. I've lived in Barnet for nearly 7 years, and I love the greenery, and I love the amount of local and community activism there is in terms of tackling climate change. But I think the fundamental thing we need to do here is to put the rocket boosters under all of this. And that's why for Barnet Liberal Democrats, the environment is embedded within all aspects of our manifesto. It comes from, creating that dedicated and expanded committee. It comes from declaring a climate emergency on day one. It comes from leading from the front and committing the council to things like promoting environmentally friendly food and drink and phasing out diesel. What we want to do, and this is the main priority thing we can do, is to embed environmentalism in all areas of policy making across Barnet Council. It is the great intergenerational challenge of our time, and it must be the overriding priority in local government. It is no use deflecting things to national government or to the Mayor of London, as the Tories always do, and it's no use kicking the can down the road to another strategy, a consultation, an engagement plan, as Labour would do. The Liberal Democrats will put the environment at the heart of everything the council does. Thank you.
Thank you. And David?
I'd like to join my fellow panelists in thanking the organisers for inviting us along to speak to people. I know that everyone who's come along is committed to helping to save the environment, to save the planet. I think we're facing a climate and ecological emergency, and our politicians, both at national, international and local level, have not yet started to take it as seriously as it really demands. I hope that when it comes to the ballot box on the 5th of May, you'll think very carefully about one of the questions that somebody asked in the chat, that they would vote for any councillor who would commit to the Friends of the Earth platform for dealing with the climate and ecological emergency. And the question to you is, do you really think that somebody in the Tory party or the Labour Party or even the Lib Dem party, who are very good at talking about green issues this evening, would be the person who will follow the Friends of the Earth Charter or would follow the action that's really needed? Therefore, I urge you, I beg you, please vote green on the 5th of May. Thank you.
Thank you, David. So we've reached the end of the hustings. Thank you to everyone for coming. Thank you for all of the engaging chats, and apologies again for not being able to ask all of your questions and read out all of your comments. We hope what you've heard here this evening will help you decide how to place your votes in the election. Please do remember to cast your vote in person on the 5th of May or return your postal vote in time. Postal votes can be taken to any polling station in the borough before 10 p.m. on polling day if needed. Thank you to the 4 community groups who have given up their time to help me organise this event. We've all worked very well together over the last few months. So it's Barnet Climate Action Group, Barnet Friends of the Earth, Better Streets for Barnet, and the Barnet Green Spaces Network, and of course the many other environmental groups in the borough who are doing great work to try and improve this great place that we live. Let's face it, Barnet is a wonderful place and we want to make it even better. Special thanks to our four speakers as well for taking the time out this evening to come during a busy campaign period, and we wish you all the best for your campaigns. Good night from everyone, and thank you again for coming.
Thanks. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good night. Thank you.